Welcome to Facing the Moment, brought to you by the Foundation for Self-Leadership. In these episodes, we will address various crises and focus on how to navigate them with abundant fortitude and a bit of hope. As we discuss relevant observations together, we will identify meaningful actions that will generate valuable insights. You can download all episodes on Apple Music, Spotify, and YouTube.
I thank our listeners for joining us today, and I appreciate your being part of this episode. We will be discussing today labelism or othering, a disconcerting reality that seems prevalent today, especially here in the US, regardless of which term we use to refer to it. We observe identities of individuals or groups to be simplistically boxed in stereotypes and reduced to sound bites. The notion of not seeing the other's humanity has no partisan or religious dimension, even though in today's world it may have been justified in certain circles as such. Nor are we in this upcoming conversation claiming to know better or take a holier-than-thou stance. Our interest is to understand what it all means and to explore the threat and harm that inflammatory thinking, language, decisions, and behaviors could have on individuals, groups, and communities, and may already have caused serious negative impact. We will attempt to uncover hopeful ways for dealing with this reality with courage and understanding, and in alignment with principles of nonviolence to help sustain a journey toward greater social justice, a term that in some circles, unfortunately, sounds today like a curse. This intent is to bring new awareness, inspire new thinking, and eventually go beyond or past the crisis. And to help me do this, I'm very, very pleased to be joined by Fatimah Finney, LMHC. Welcome, Fatimah.
Thank you, Tawfiq, for having me. I appreciate it.
Our pleasure. Fatimah is a creative thinker whose wise insights on cultural issues I have often witnessed and admired. She is a licensed mental health counselor who has been serving for a while on the Internal Family Systems, IFS that is, training faculty, introducing practitioners to IFS, and deepening their competence in applying the model. Fatimah has designed and hosted numerous sought-after workshops to help address cultural differences and help liberate communities from the grip of oppressive systems. Fatimah helped the foundation design, launch, and lead the IFS Leadership Fellows Program that supported 24 emerging leaders a couple of years ago as they sought to facilitate collective healing. And for that alone, I'm deeply grateful. Again, welcome, Fatimah. What else might you like to add to what I shared about you, which would be relevant to our conversation today?
Well, one, that I'm a United States citizen, that I am a Muslim woman as well, and that my faith and its intersection with my racial identity, I think really gives me a unique voice. It's often I'm the only voice in a lot of places that I have in the IFS community at that intersection, and so I hope to bring that experience to our conversation to the extent that it's relevant.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm sure you will, and I'm sure it'll be very, very enriching. So let's start by assessing the landscape. We seem to be living in a world of isms. In many communities, there is significant concern, and has been for long periods of time, about individual and systemic racism, sexism, ageism, anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, xenophobia, ...
Yeah.
Might we start there? Could you share with me what you see and how can we get our arms around this reality in a practical sense beyond the theoretical and the scholarly debates?
Well, I think even as you say all of those things, like I feel exhausted, like all of those as you were naming them, it's just like, yeah, a lot of that is heavy. And I think it's important, at least the way that I hold it, that all these
isms are intentionally crafted. They don't come out of nowhere. When we're talking about systems of oppression, there's an intention behind them. And I sit with a lot of, okay, how do I remember who I am despite what these systems try to tell me about myself? And so I think a daily practice is of how do I just remember that? How do I remember that this is an idea about me versus the essence of who I am? And that's not always easy to do in the culture of capitalism and busyness. But I think it's vital to our survival. I think it's vital to our joy to remember that we are not these ideas that have been placed upon us, and to be mirrors of that and reminders of that to each other. Otherwise, we're going to be consumed by it. Or we're going to become agents of these systems and continue to perpetuate harm onto others that we may not intend to. So I think it's important to start by recognizing that.
Yes, thank you for that. The listeners couldn't see, but I was nodding as you were separating how people see you or what they say about you, how they paint you, and who you truly are, and your confidence about who you truly are. What kind of, let's say, awareness does that take, or even skill, to be able to get to that point where you have that confidence about who you are?
I think it takes time. It takes examples of other people who walk in their confidence. I don't get here alone, and I don't think I'm always fully there. It depends on the day that you catch me. Like, there may be times I recognize how much I absorb and take in some of these messages myself. But I think seeing models of it, seeing models of courage, of people who say, no, that's not who I am, or no, I'm not going to be an object of treating other people in ways that they don't deserve. And I think it takes practice. And I think in this particular moment in time, it becomes more difficult because of all of the means of distraction for us to remain distracted from being present. It takes slowing down to actually feel into who am I really versus who am I conditioned to be? Who does the marketing tell me that I should be? Who does the marketing and the social media news feeds tell me I should think about other people? So, yeah, it takes, I think, slowing down in ways that people are afraid to do or feel like they don't even have a choice to do. They just have to keep going and going and going. But what I'm finding in my moments of stillness and my moments of solitude is that it just frees up my mind and it brings in that clarity in a way that my spirit is yearning for, but those parts that are afraid feel like, oh no, it's not possible. Like I have to do the thing, I have to stay busy, or, freedom and silence can come at a later date. And so I think some of that courage is saying, no, now, it can be here now. I can pause now. I must pause now in order to attach back to who I am.
Yeah. So there's some consciousness about it, some intention, to do it instead of just let's be. One has to be thinking about this in this environment probably constantly. There seems to be a natural inclination among us human beings to belong to some group of we. And it's not just human beings, it's true for many living beings.
Yeah.
And when we do that, we try not to, but often, maybe inadvertently, we place everyone else as the other.
Yeah.
Often without seeking to understand the issue that the other is facing or how the other got there.
Yeah.
Where does this tendency go too far, in your opinion? And what are some of the negative effects you see and could anticipate about placing the other out there?
I think it goes too far when the other is devalued and dehumanized. I think difference, right? We can recognize that, hey, we maybe my family, maybe, growing up as Muslims, growing up as African American, we can say, hey, this is we and how we are. But if we're talking about the other, somebody who's not Muslim, somebody who's not African American, if it becomes something where now we're creating superiority or hierarchy, that's when I think it's gone too far. And I think that becomes rampant in terms of how people try to survive or how people try to justify treating people. There's steps to it, right? I think that people forget that there is a we that we can't run away from. Like, we are all connected. We are all human beings. We need each other. But these systems of oppression have been built to say, actually, if we make this group less than, then we don't have to treat them with the dignity that they actually deserve. And we see that with, the slave trade here in America, right? People of my skin tone were considered 3/5 of a human being, right? Something that just is ridiculous, but that served a function to dehumanize them to do everything that they done. And so anytime where people are creating groups of us versus them, if you're finding in the language that you're using about them, if you're finding in the energy towards them is requiring you to see them other than being a human being that deserve the rights and the dignity that you and your group live, we're in dangerous territory. And we're more likely to perpetuate a lot of the harms, the generational harms, the extermination of people that we're seeing today.
Yeah, and that's very heartbreaking for sure, and infuriating in some fashion.
Yeah.
So it's like what you're saying is sometimes consciously or unconsciously, certain groups justify this system that separates people in a vertical way, better than, holier than, more righteous than.
Yeah.
And there often seem to be unspoken and unchecked assumptions that rise to the level of ironclad certainty that stand behind these acts by individuals, organizations, or even governments. We stereotype a whole community from an experience or observation of an N equal 10 individuals.
Yeah.
Right? Or simply based on simply hearing about some stories, the veracity of which possibly questionable.
Yeah.
And I think that act, to me anyway, appears to be intellectually lazy, stereotyping that is, and deceiving, emotionally inauthentic and defensive. And I hasten to add that most of us can easily fall into that trap, regardless of what we believe about ourselves. So given today's open political attack on certain communities, as one example, I'm curious to hear from you if common assumptions stand out that we need to address, that are used overtly or covertly to justify, like you said, justify thoughts or behaviors.
Yeah, and I think about how it's pretty common for us to make these groupings or make assumptions about people, because in a way, to an extent, is how we're wired. Like, the brain takes in information and organizes it in a way to make things a bit more efficient for us. So the next time we encounter it, we're able to engage with it from a certain point. I think the trouble with that is how we're socialized, whether it's from our families of origin, our communities, right? The ideas and the narratives that we get about who we are and quote unquote who they are. It's how do we change those narratives? One, if they're inaccurate, if they're harmful, or oftentimes if they're incomplete, right? People have incomplete information of what you're saying. I had this one encounter with this person with this background, and so then we generalize it for everyone with that experience, and it really flattens a group into these stereotypes. And one of the ways that I think curiosity can be so important is to think about, what have I learned about this group? How do I know that? Especially when I feel so certain about it, right? Sometimes we're so certain because of repetition. I grew up hearing this so many times that it just feels like it's true. And then everyone in my community who I see, they're saying it and they're sharing it back with me. So that makes it truer. And there still can be, this is also a lie. That's not true of that group at all. But because I've heard it so much, it has felt like my truth and my understanding of it. And I think even since really COVID, where we had to separate from each other. It's almost like we have not recovered from getting back to like getting to know people. How do we get to know people? And it's almost like separated us even more so of, what do I think I know about somebody? And how do I just run with what I think I know as fact versus even challenging my own thoughts about a group, but even thoughts about the world? And now that information is so much more digitized and also can be created, facts and information can literally be created with AI. We're in this challenging time of what is true, what is actually true about a given group, or even what's going on in my neighborhood. And I think that makes it really difficult to navigate, like, is this true about a group? Is this true about what's actually going on in the world? And I think without, again, those examples or even direction, the brain is kind of going to do what it's kind of designed to do. The hope that I hold around that is in people having conversations, kind of like this one, of inviting us back into the moment of like, wait, what am I actually thinking about all of this? What views do I actually hold about this other group that maybe I keep seeing about in my news feed or in my timeline? How am I engaging with it? Because if I'm not actively engaging with it, then my passive engagement is just opening doors to whatever whatever the news media outlet or the person is saying about it. And I think that's harmful too. Sometimes people are like, oh, it's just, it's just a post, it's just this, but we can maybe minimize how much this is then affecting our brain schemas. That then reinforces the assumptions and the stereotypes, even if we're not trying to, even if we're just looking for entertainment. And so I think we would need to be more intentional around, what information am I consuming, even if it seems harmless, and what ways might it be building a case against a group of people in my psyche, even at an unconscious level, that I didn't even consent to, I wasn't trying to have, but over time I start to take in this information about this particular group.
Yeah, I hear you say two things, actually, very, very important to underline. One is how I need to stay informed and question, consciously, openly, meticulously, what I'm consuming and what it all means, almost like be the filter. And I'm also hearing you say that I have to not look the other way. When I hear something that somehow I feel is judgmental, inaccurate, falsified about a group of people, about someone's identity, about putting everybody in the same box. Yeah. Right? So tell me more about the latter. What can I do in certain situations? When does it pay off to be quiet? Or is there such a time? And when is it absolutely necessary for me to jump in and fight, again, non-violently, in dialogue, group think? Because you said we're influenced by family, we're influenced by our circles, we're influenced by the media, and that repetition, that barrage of information, especially when it's not correct, tend to become normalized.
Yeah.
So what can you say about what's my responsibility as someone who wants people to resolve conflict differently and wants people to see the others a bit more, for who they are?
Yeah. I think when it comes to conflict resolution, it would have to be like training in it, because it's not for the faint of heart. Oftentimes when conflict are there, you have people who are really going into survival mode. Even for things that just feels like it's debate, it's words, there's something that gets activated in people around a sense of themselves, right? Their ideas, what they think about other people. It feels as though if they're a challenge, you are challenging their whole identity, except for rather than you're just challenging the ideas that they're bringing to a conversation. And that can be very tense. That can be hard on the nervous system. That can be hard on relationships, right? Where the intention is to bring people together, to maybe highlight things, but that's not always how people receive it. when power is brought into there, if you're talking with people and there's different power dynamics, someone has power over you or somebody who is in a down power position from you, knowing how to bring people into conversation when you're navigating that, I think is important. And for a rare group of people, that just comes naturally for them. But for most people, they need to read a book on it. They need to like understand what's happening there. But I would say at minimum, I think about the power of a pause. So even if we don't know what to say or how to get people to like change their minds on anything, we feel in our systems when we're in conversations and things are getting heated, or we feel like people are being hurt, or people, quite frankly, aren't even being heard by each other. And so I think one practical thing is just like asking people to pause. It could be like, slow down here, like just to pause, because I hear a lot of important things being said, but can we just pause? I want to just make sure that I got it all. And I find that sometimes that could benefit a lot of people, because without telling them, hey, take a moment and check yourself, or it's just like, can we just pause and kind of let silence be a diffuser? And that can give space. Sometimes people, all right, I'm going to go to the bathroom. Like it just diffuses something just by inviting in that pause. But then if bring on curiosity, like I'm wondering what conversation are we having? I think about Chris Burris, one of my mentors, talks about like, what conversation are we actually having here, right? For some people, they're trying to have a conversation because they're trying to connect and be seen and belong. Other people, they're debating the facts and they want to be right and they want people to know the facts of a situation. And other people are just here because someone brought them to the conversation and they don't care anyway what's going on. So it's important to know what's at stake for people in a conversation. And is this conversation actually going to fulfill the need that people are trying to get met? And so that feels important, because people can be talking and they're not getting their needs met and they're getting upset about it, but no one's really teasing out, oh, you need this. Well, you all can have a different conversation and just talk about, the weather or the TV show, because you're looking for a different kind of connection. Whereas you over here are trying to debate the facts about what's going on in the world right now. And that can sometimes help people separate out to actually then bring in the conflict resolution. How do we actually talk? Because I think when people are not listening, they can't learn. But sometimes we try to force people to do something that they're not even ready for, or they're not even interested in. Or what I'm learning too, that they'll never hear from you ever. So sometimes I find myself, who is the best person to actually deliver this? Who is the best person to highlight for this person that they're getting information that is absolutely false? Because if they hear it from me, automatically they're going to take it as a challenge. That's just what it's going to do.
Yeah. I mean, it's very clear to me that often the problem with dialogue today is that we're not there to learn from each other.
We're there to fight.
It seems like we're there to convince the other that we have the right perspective, or that we know the best history, or that we understand the reality the best, right? So it's a competition. As such, there's no give or take. There's no time taken for me to really appreciate why you came to where you are. And I'm curious about the why people get there, right? I mean, so what has given rise to such perspectives and attitudes? I mean, I'm thinking in some communities, particularly the Black community, or maybe the Muslim community or the Jewish community, there's been the reality of stereotyping for years and decades and centuries. And that reality has been there in how they process information, how they connect, how they form a bond within their own community. And today the threat, it seems, has heightened a few notches. I'm always curious about what has given rise to such perspectives and attitudes. Without going too far down the journey of history, what can you say about, from your vantage point, why are we here today?
So I actually think it's more about not so much about race or faith or anything. I think it's about power and money. I think it's about the people who have power trying to maintain power and keep the power that they have at the expense of those who don't have power in whatever way, rising up and saying that this isn't fair, or rising up and saying that you said that you were going to do A and now you're doing B. You're trying to convince me that B is A. And I think over time, when people are constantly lied to, constantly put into conditions and expected to survive without the same types of rights that other people have and other people are so easily given, that people come to a breaking point around that, that they get tired of trying to dialogue, that they get tired of trying to, I think especially in the Black community, needing to be the ones who turn the other cheek, needing to be the ones who have to bring people back to themselves, needing to be the ones who have to clean up messes. And I think people are kind of fed up with that. I think that also, when you were talking earlier, what I wanted to say is that, it feels also too that when people are coming to dialogue, if they're even coming to dialogue, it's not so much about I want to convince you even more even. It's like, I want to shame you and make you feel bad about how you think or what you're thinking about, so that I can because that will make me feel better about myself. Like it feels like there's even a step further. And I think that tech has a big reason for that. I think like with social media, the blessing and the curse of it is that it's flattened the ways in which people communicate, where people will say things or tweet things or just post things they may never say to someone face to face like this. And so it's almost like provoked sort of the worst aspects of us, because it's in this way, it's in this space of accountability that people don't have. There's no regulation of what gets put on there. And so I think that also has a lot to do with how we got here today, and how there isn't a sense of, rupture and repair. It's just like, no, I said what I said and that's it. And I think even now we have that example in our leadership here in the U.S., where there isn't this repair. It's like whoever has power, they have carte blanche to do whatever or say whatever they want. And it kind of really erodes our common sense of decency, our sense of what's just kind of the humane thing to do here. And when I think about, me, being a parent to young people, and I think about the young people who've been growing up in the last decade or so, of what they've seen around human relationships and how do we relate to each other, it makes it really difficult when there's no accountability. And most people are on social media and interacting daily, that having a conversation like we're having face to face, people don't have the mechanics, people don't have the ways of being that were just maybe commonplace 20 years ago or 30 years ago, about how you speak with someone. How do you even bring facts to a debate? It's like facts are even up for debate. Is this real or is this not real, in a way that it hasn't been before?
You mentioned the word power earlier, and I personally have no issue with power, because power could be for good. Mm-hmm. I have issue with dominance, domination, a false sense, really, of dominance. And I think that's what I'm noticing these days, that certain groups, certain systems, certain individuals have that sense or have that desire to dominate. And that is driving principles and agendas and philosophies, which are turning into what we see around us as oppressive systems, right? Yeah. And some of your serious efforts, Fatimah, have focused on helping individuals and groups loosen the grip of oppression, like I said in my introduction. How might you explain what oppression is? And what can you say about its intended and unintended effects?
Oh, that's a big question, Tawfiq. And I really feel like I've been sitting with this as well. When I see how people are treated around the world. So I would normally say, oppression is like denying the human rights of a person, denying the dignity that they deserve, and seeing people less than human. And then I would normally kind of, label the isms, like this is a
Mhm.
system of oppression, this is a system of oppression, this is a system of oppression. And I feel like today, especially seeing like we're in the midst of what we see is happening to the Palestinian people, and that's advertised. But then I'm thinking about people who are in the Congo and people who are in Sudan, like people where things are happening in the world and it's like blip. There's a blip of it. So there's like, and I'm like, oh, like there's something about erasure. There's something in oppression about like it's happening, but like you don't even rise to the level of importance. Um, and the second part of your question was around like the unintended consequences
Mm-hmm.
of
Mm-hmm.
it. I think because oppression in all its forms have been happening for so long, right? Like probably since humans have been here, there's been some form of oppression. And I think that some of the unintended consequence of that is that we believe it has to be this way because it's always been there. There gets to be this belief. I hear people talk about it. Well, that's just how it's always been, or like there's always going to be wars. Like we lose our ability to even imagine something different simply because it's always been there. And I think when we lose that, we're deemed to perpetuate it. We're deemed to kind of be agents of this because we already give up. Like, what might it be like to live at least where maybe most of it, or maybe there's less of it. But I think that the impact of it can render people hopeless pretty quickly, that we don't even try to change it.
Yeah,
Beyond lip service.
yeah. We surrender to what is harmful to us.
Yeah.
And we see that in many, communities that where there's abuse and violence. Often, this state of response is takes over.
Yeah.
After a while, it feels like it's the easiest way out at times.
And I think the line between entertainment and what's happening in real life has been blurred. Like, some of the things that we are now seeing are happening to actual people before would look like something that would only be in a movie. Like that was, but I think the line has been so blurred, or it's completely gone. And I think that's also impacted people's psyches of like, we see so much violence, at least in American media, that it's almost like we're desensitized to it as well.
Well, not only that, sometimes we cheer on the violent
There you go.
protagonist.
Yeah.
Right. So in real life, it's like an easy transition from entertainment, like you said, to reality.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm interested in how to effectively challenge these perspectives.
Mm-hmm.
Right. We'll come back to this later, but I know that we have to realize that all of us, unfortunately, find ourselves in our own bubble, sometimes concretely reinforced bubble.
Yeah.
Right? And I admit that I'm in mine, and as much as I try to pierce mine, it's sometimes hard.
Yes.
So I have to remind myself, I need to get out of my bubble to try to understand. But in the interim, I have to challenge perspectives that are really, in my humble opinion, or in my own emotions, feel like my own core is being attacked.
Yeah.
You mentioned being present. You mentioned taking a pause, taking a moment before we react. What are other, I don't know, call them techniques or approaches one might take to challenge these perspectives and be heard?
I think one of the things that I like to ask myself, and what I recommend to some of my consultees, is checking in with what's your intention in whatever you're about before saying or doing anything. What is your intention for this person? Because I think the way to repair for this is actually bringing in what oppression takes away from people. How do you still humanize this person that you're trying to have a connection with? If you're feeling like, no, I just want to tell them that they're wrong, like I just want to challenge them for challenge sake, then I'm like, well, maybe you should probably be quiet, because you challenging them for challenging sake is just going to make them more defensive, and they're just going to puff up, and so it's just going to make more of what you actually don't want. But if you're like, I really want them to see this differently, then you might lead with that of, hey, Tawfiq, I hear you saying X, Y, or Z. And I've heard you say it a lot. You I don't know, every time in a group chat, you bring in this perspective. I've been wanting to say this to you, but I don't know how. So I'm going to just try it. Like putting it out there. I'm trying to bring something else to you, because then it just has people settle in a way of like, this isn't a fight. This isn't a debate. I'm just trying to put this here. And I've been listening to you, right? I've noticed that you put it in this. I've been listening to you. But here's what I know. And I wonder if you've heard this perspective, right? So it's bringing in, we're trying to have a conversation here. I don't want to challenge you, because challenging you is just probably going to get you to want to fight. And when we fight, we're not listening to each other. But it's these incremental things. And also, I think a practical thing is like, what's your intention? What's your stamina for this work? Because sometimes I think people want to change in a conversation, or, I want to just say the right thing that just changes their whole mind and perspective and outlook. Sometimes that happens for people, but most time, no. It is the constant, like, coming back to changing, listening to people, coming back and debating with them, but in a way where it's like, this is not going to ruin a whole relationship because we're disagreeing around this. And I know oftentimes people say, you know what, I do have my boundaries. If you don't believe this thing that I believe, like, this is the line. I can't believe or have a conversation with someone who believes that. And that's why I say that's great to recognize then. But then think about who can have that conversation and how do I get them sitting with this person, versus what I think people tend to do is just cut the person off. So then we have more silos of like the people over here who agree. They're not talking to the people over here who don't disagree, but rather thinking about who are the bridge builders, right? Who might have the capacity to talk to somebody who has a different perspective, maybe because they're talking to their cousin who has that, and they have more agility, they have more capacity to do that. I think it's how do we have the goal of like, we need to connect with people. We need to connect with people, and we need to be able to connect across differences versus staying in our silos of Democrat or Republican or us versus them, and they're just a problem and we're not, because it might feel good to the ego, but it's not moving us towards progress to do that. And then it's like, well, who is the person who can, bridge us both together until people have more capacity, or until the tide has shifted enough that then most people will start to go. I think in those conversations, it's pausing. What is my intention? If my intention is like, I can't even see this person as human, I'm not meant for this conversation right now, but who might? Thinking about your network. And that brings me to the point of community too. Like, doing this work with people, trying to change people's minds, even more so trying to touch people's hearts, because a lot of this is emotion. It's based on emotion. People are afraid. People are, even if what they're believing isn't true, it is activating their nervous systems into survival mode. And it's going to take people who have the capacity. So I think, and I feel this therapist and able to sit with a lot of emotions, we have a potential to be really helpful in social justice and activism, to help people with that. But I think people got to slow way down. And like, how do I have a conversation where I can still see this person as human, even the most egregious things are coming out of their mouths? And that is hard. And I think people need to have their own community that they can go and land in and lick their wounds when, someone says the wrong thing or it doesn't go well, because having that community space will allow you to get back out there. And I think people are like, that happened. I didn't like the way that made me feel, so I'm done. I'm just going to go back to my group of sameness. I'm going to go back to my safety zone, rather than being in that space of, healthy challenge, safe discomfort. Yeah, that's what's coming to me.
Yeah, thank you. You said a lot of very insightful comments in this response, Fatimah. Clearly, endurance, stood out, that this is not something that's going to happen overnight, and I have to be in it if I want to, see myself out of it. And it sounds like I have to be serious about it. And I'm hoping the other person will also be serious about it.
Yeah.
It's like what is torn down in a decade is going to require a century to fix, but it's worth it. Mm-hmm. And also what occurred to me is we are fortunate that there are a few organizations and a few good men and women and others like you who are in this work, building these bridges, because we cannot wait for governments to do it because we're not getting what we need from these systems. It seems like it's folks who are either being affected by the systems negatively or trying to prevent further decay are jumping in and trying to make it happen. So I'd like to go personal with you, if you don't mind, to the extent you're comfortable sharing about your own personal experience, just to make this less hypothetical. Whether you felt othered or not at a given point in your life, maybe you can share the context, how it landed on you and your family, and really how you navigated in that.
Yeah. I certainly have. I think there's, so again, that intersection of being African American and Muslim. I'm like a minority within a minority group. A large part of the African community is a Christian community, so there's been some othering around that. Like I noticed with some groups, if they're like, especially since 9/11 and what that's done to like Muslims in the United States and how they're perceived and seen. Like I've definitely felt like even in Black spaces, like a pause around like, oh, Muslim, or we don't know those, or comments even in Black spaces about like those Muslims not recognizing that they're Black Muslims, or even if they did, like there's just this sense of like, if you're Black, you're Christian, when there's actually, the Black Muslim experience. So I know I felt it there. And I think on a large scale of on the flip side of that being Muslim, and then the stereotype that all Muslims are Arab. So it's like almost like being erased or like not thought of, or people are just like, oh, well, I remember I've had clients who like I worked with for a pretty long time, and even covered in the way that I did. And she was shocked when I told her, I made like a comment about being Muslim, and she was like, I had no idea you were a Muslim. And I was shocked that she didn't know. But in her head, she was like, because Muslims are something else, right? Muslims are from a different place. And the way that I think I deal with that, growing up, my faith was always something that felt private or personal. And I think that was because it was already enough being Black, like something that you could see already. But I think now in my life, I lean more into my faith because I'm like, this has shaped so much of me. Like when people talk about, even some of the things you reflect back to me of like, oh, how you are and how I'm received in the community and the different conversations in my way of being, so much of that has to do with the teachings from my faith in terms of how you treat people and how important it is to make people feel good and how important it is to be honest with them, but also have compassion. And so I find myself now leading with that in a way that feels quite important, especially now with this light on Muslims on a global stage. It feels important for me, especially when I know the stats of like how strongly people feel about Muslims, but then how little people know about Muslims at the same time, to be like, I'm a Muslim. And if you have questions or you want to know something, like at least talk to a Muslim, at least talk and understand a real person in 3D versus the things that come out on news media or all the different ways that people get information. And so that feels really important to me in terms of like, I'm being other in this way, but I at least want to put a voice in this, right? People still do and think what they want to think, but I find myself leaning into, at least you can't have the excuse anymore of like, I don't know a Muslim to talk to. Because I'm like, I'm Muslim. You want to talk to me? You want to know about something? Right. Come and ask, knowing that my experience is one of, the billion of Muslims around the world. But I think that's like a big part of kind of where we are. People have these caricatures in their minds and hearts about people, but had an actual conversation.
Right. And then there is unfortunately ignorance and a lack of desire to change that ignorance about the principles or philosophies or teachings that various, faith traditions have.
Yeah.
Right. And, and then there is this logical breakdown that people fall into.
Yeah.
That's a very common one, right? Like in 9/11, those who committed these atrocious acts happened to be Muslim. So people read it as all Muslims can commit these acts of terror. Right? It's called in Boolean algebra association. It goes one way, but not the other. But for many people, they just, there's a breakdown in logic and there's an assumption, and then they read the headline somewhere or inaccurate fact about teachings in Islam or some other religion, and then they somehow armor themselves with that belief, and that becomes an issue. So there is the inability to get to know someone and understand someone's journey and experience, and then there's an inability to understand the greater context. And these two issues, unfortunately, are problematic. Go ahead.
I think what I want to add to that too is that people have a lot of help with drawing those conclusions, right? So you see the difference in how media portrays certain things. Like we even see that with things that happen here, right? These days, if a Muslim does something, their faith is put out there, even though people kill people, they do all kinds of things, they shoot up schools, and they might have a faith, but that's not what's put out as in front, even though they might have it. And so again, going back to how systems are intentionally designed to have people think a certain thing about people, especially the media, everyday people have help with how people in power, people who have an agenda, want people to think. And so I think that's why the questioning and the curiosity, how do I know what I know about Muslims? Or how do I know what I know about the other? Who taught me that? Was it my family, or was it the group? Was it, whatever Facebook groups that I'm in now these days? Or because then we can try to see like, oh, well, if I got all of my knowledge about this group from this Facebook group, where's the evidence of that?
Right. Or from a Hollywood movie, right?
Well, from Hollywood movies.
And we might appreciate the entertainment factor.
Yes.
There's a lot of stereotyping in Hollywood movies that make people laugh or make people angry about, certain realities.
Yep.
So, you're a therapist and you've dealt with emotional pain. Make it even more personal from what you saw yourself and what you saw in other clients. These experiences leave indelible marks in our system. Tell me about some of these extreme emotions that often the oppressor and the dominant system ignores or is completely unaware of. What's the real pain here that we need to address?
So what I hear a lot, so to your question of like the real pain of
emotional, spiritual, if I'm being oppressed.
It's fully comprehensive. It's fully comprehensive. It is emotional distress. It is spiritual distress. It is physical distress. When we talk about trauma, and it's traumatic. It is traumatic to exist in a world and to constantly be erased. Like when we talk about people will talk about the experiences of microaggressions, and they're like, it is just this weathering over time. It is something that I can't escape. If I'm working in a workplace where I am, the only Black person there, and I'm constantly being told directly or indirectly about how I'm incompetent, even though I outperform my coworkers, then I go, and maybe I'm going to my car and I'm driving around the neighborhood, and the advertisements that I see are constantly reflecting back that beauty is something other than me, right? Then I go home, and the things that I see on the TV channel or even the shows that I see, there's not a lot of representation of myself. There's these constant messaging of like, whatever is good, you're not it. And that can really disrupt somebody's psyche. It can create all the different things that we see in our offices around depression, around people not liking themselves, self-harm. And depending on, maybe this person is not living in the same state as their family. So there's going through all of that, and there's a whole level of isolation. So much research has shown people who go through that, they're more likely to start developing physical conditions in addition to the socio-emotional ones that they have, right? Like they are now, dealing with stomach conditions, anxiety showing up as irritable bowel syndrome, or they're going in and out, needing to see doctors. But then they get to the doctor's office, and the racism that's within the medical system is now perpetuated in the treatment that they have, right? So now they're either minimizing their symptoms, they're misdiagnosing them or overdiagnosing them, or sometimes just telling them that, oh, you just need to lose weight. This is only just about your weight, when it's like, I'm actually fine and healthy when it comes to this. And that's not even what I'm coming to you for. So people who decide, oh, I do need to get help, but they're going into these systems that are designed to not really help them, that can really take someone out. Literally, either they're walking around like they're hopeless, walking around like there's no point in life, or they really opt out of life, right? And they decide that they don't want to live anymore. And so I think that's the pain of how we really miss out on the vibrancy and the contributions that people can give to the world, because the system has decided these people are not valuable. So I think we all lose out, because how many people have brilliance within them? How many people actually, could have cured things like cancer or some of these diseases if they were given opportunities to allow their creative being, their whole being, to be recognized and to be valued? But we miss out on that because people are blocked. People don't get the same opportunities. People don't even get to see themselves fully and imagine what they can contribute to the world. And so I think that's the pain of it. I think that's the pain of, we don't even know what we could have had already.
Right.
If there wasn't racism in the world, if it wasn't sexism, if it wasn't all these isms that are so determined to keep a certain group in power.
Yeah. What a sadly missed, not just opportunity, life.
Life.
Like the liveliness of life is, and this is certainly, so there's a whole range of emotions I'm hearing from you that go from despair all the way to indignation and anger. So it's like the physical equivalent of it is a deep injury that never heals, because someone keeps hitting on that same injury and it gets infected and it spreads and so on. So this is on the individual, but then if we think collectively on the whole community, what does that look like? If this continues year after year, decade after decade, and now we have a whole community of people who have experienced this range of, let's call them assaults or attacks, again, being conscious or unconscious.
And I think the blessing in all of this is that, there's something to the human spirit that still allows it to show up, right? So even if I'm talking about, people who have gone through some of the most egregious things, there's also ways of surviving, right? And people who are othered by society find ways to give themselves joy, find ways to remember who they actually are, even in a system that is bent on making sure that you are seen as other. And so whether it's through music, whether it's through community, whether it is through the food, whether it is through like all of these ways of like, how did the people before me get through this? Because this is what they were burdened with too. And they still were able to find ways to love. They still were able to find ways for us to be here. And so I think it's not a given that, oh, this is all pain and, these groups of people are just struggling, there's nothing there. No, there's resilience there too. And I think that's the power of knowing when someone is putting a lie before your face. When you are clear on that, then there's ways that you can kind of protect yourself. You can not allow that to get into you. You can uproot it from your lineage. You can make sure that the way that you parent your children, the way that you parent the children in the community, to say, hey, this is the world that we're in, but here's what is yours and here's what somebody is somebody else's. And I think that is what allows people to continue to go on, even in the face of oppression. And it's the community, I think, too, that keeps people together. So the coming together, whether it's in faith groups, whether it's in book clubs that people do, is to come in together to be reminded of, no, you're not in this alone. Yes, I see exactly what you're going through. Yes, I'm going through that too. I think that has been the saving grace of communities, of people. And I think it's a reminder too of the importance of the collective, which is something that in the U.S. we can really benefit from coming back to, that other cultures really have, right? We focus so much on individualism, and I think that's really, if we prop individualism up even more so, that's really going to be our downfall, because it is in the community, it is in the collective that things change, that big things change when we work together, and we're not going to get where we want to go one by one in isolation.
Thank you for bringing up this gift of survival that we have.
Mm-hmm.
And not only the survival, but I think we have a desire to thrive in the face of adversity, right? And that's really what we hope to inspire communities to embrace, because it's there, it's within us. Yet sometimes we lose track of it, we lose sight of it because the pain weighs us down.
And I think the divisions that we're conditioned here in the U.S., like, we don't see, like, it feels like this is just within my group, right? But we have to see, like, oh, if this group is thriving, then how does that benefit us? How do we connect and come together across, like, Muslims and Christians and Jews connecting around what does liberation for all of us look like, right? How do men and women break down the millennia of patriarchy between us, sexism? Like, how do we come together around, like, no, how do we both get liberated from these things that have limited both of us, that we both don't really benefit from? How do we start telling the truth of that? But I think so long as people feel like their safety comes from stepping on someone else, that's always going to put a wrench into progress. Is so long as people feel as though there's only so little and we all can't have enough. I'm just like, how many times we talk about all these billions of dollars, and what's the lesson in how we saw that COVID stopped us and shut us down, but like, we can take rest if we want. Like, we saw that, like, we could do that. But as long as people feel like the way things are is the best that it can be, those will be the things that will put a wrench into us trying to reimagine how we can be human.
Yeah. Well, this is certainly giving us hope and make us believe that the possibilities are ahead of us. And like you said, it's at the end, the only way for us as a human race to survive is to think in positive sum game language and philosophy instead of a zero-sum game, right? If I gain something, it doesn't mean that you have to lose it. Both of us can gain. And we have to look for ways where both of us can be elevated and uplifted rather than one at the expense of the other.
Yeah.
And that brings me to something you talk about often, and you use that language, liberation. Yeah. Tell me what that means, and imagine with me a world where this is more common than not.
Yeah. So I feel like it's always changing. But in this moment, I mean, the elements that seem to stay consistent with when I think about liberation is like freedom to be yourself and freedom to have your basic needs met. Like a world, and when I'm talking about like actual rest, right? To have a livelihood, actual rest that's not just tied to this kind of industrial 5-day a week work week, where you're able to see your family, where you're able to have hobbies and things that you do that doesn't have to involve a paycheck or a number to it. Is there a space to enjoy? And a lot of us don't get that. Like there's this sense that we worship the dollar, right? So many, it's like we have to show up for that. But our family and all the things we have to do for our family, we just have to fit that into 48 hours. But money gets all the others. And then sometimes it also goes into our weekends. Like when I'm thinking about liberation, I'm like, we work to help us live, but we don't live for work. In other countries, I think, like as we look to the world and not be so self-centered here in the US, we can see other ways of being that could actually help us. I think liberation is spiritual. We've gotten away from our spirit and the soul and, I don't know, modernity and the last couple of centuries and focusing so much on the brain. We've broken ourselves away into just like rational thought, and that's what's important. And we're just like disembodied in ways that I think really harm us and then creates us in these divides of I'm about science, I'm about this. And I think being reclaiming like what it means to be a human being. And it's all of those things. We are brain, we are body, we are spirit. It's not one or the other. And the way that I reimagine it is a world that is a bit more liberated, really is redefining what do we wake up for in the morning. For a lot of people, it's for $1. And I'm like, we got to find a way back to it. I wake up in the morning to make a difference and to connect with people. We might live a bit differently.
Well, that's certainly very inspiring, and it's a nice metaphor for us to think about the way we broke up the integrity of a human being by discretizing, if that's a word, separating the brain from the heart, from the spirit, from the body, we're doing to society by creating these boxes and labels. And one thing you helped us see in this discussion, Fatimah, is that regardless of how people, groups, or systems behave, none of us can be simplified into a label, into one story. We're multitude, right? Our journeys are rich. Our experiences and generational histories are too rich to be explained in one sentence, in a headline.
Yeah.
Right? Even when others cannot or refuse to see us as equally human with the fundamental clarity and growing complexity of what being human actually means.
Yeah.
Yet we are here. And it takes two to tango, as the adage goes, and it will take both the otherer and the one being other to step up. It's unfair for us to expect the one being other to always step up. We somehow need both, and we need ways to invite the otherer to step up and do what is needed to rectify what has been problematic on many levels.
Yeah.
And it's not always incumbent on the one being attacked to be imagining ways to fix the problem, like you said earlier. Nonetheless, there are attitudes and approaches we can take to take care of our own needs in these moments and in these struggles and reclaim our dignity. Maya Angelou reminds us to say what is important for us to say, when it is important for us to say it, in ways that it can be heard. And that to me is critical. How can we say what we need to say in a way that it can be heard? This is a manifestation of our deep sense of self-worth, expecting to be treated well and treat others the same. So I'm going to give you the last word. This has been a very engaging conversation, as I expected it to be, Fatimah, and very insightful. Thank you. But here are your last words. What gives you hope and resilience at this moment beyond of what you shared so far?
Yeah, well, I noticed that the Maya Angelou, I love Maya Angelou and her work, and to do that, right, to say what you need to say when it can be heard, I think takes attunement. It takes exactly what I was saying before of presence, but first presence with our own selves, right? What is my voice? What do I actually need to say? What haven't I been saying? And what's been keeping me from saying it, right? Like almost assessing our own lives of how have I been betraying myself by maybe putting all my effort into something I actually don't want to do. And now that I'm noticing that, oh, I do have things to say and I want to say them, how do I then sense into what's going to be the best way for me to be heard here? Because maybe now isn't the moment. And also, am I avoiding the now when it is the moment? Because the fear can say, be quiet. If you're coming from a marginalized group, you've been conditioned to be quiet and let the other with power speak. So it's like, oh, how do I tap into my own courage to speak, to pause the moment, to speak truths to power sometimes, to call people in and say, here's what I'm noticing about you. This is not who you said you were going to be. And I just want to name this, even if you don't change. I want to go on the record that I at least put this out here to the group. And I think the hope that I get from that is that we all have the tool. We all have a voice. It's just, do we open our mouths and say it? And that's what gives me hope. Like it's right there. The tools are already in there. It's just, how do we get more courage? And I appreciate the opportunity to be on the podcast and the effort that you're doing with the podcast, because I know from listening to other podcasts how I've been encouraged to speak up more because of something somebody else said. And so I'm hoping that this chain of like, all right, the more people hear how it's not something that you arrive at, you still speak even if your voice shakes, but certain things need to be said. And then certain things also need to be done, because I think sometimes we can get caught into doing a lot of talking and actually abandon other really critical action.
Fatimah, thank you again so very much. Best wishes.
Thank you, Tawfiq.
Thanks for listening. Facing the Moment is an independent production of the Foundation for Self-Leadership, a nonprofit committed to bringing emotional, relational, and societal healing and well-being to a world in need. Learn more at foundationifs.org. You can download this and all other episodes on Apple Music, Spotify, and YouTube. Until the next episode, may we all keep facing the moment with grit and grace.